welcome to the One Player Podcast, the show on solitaire board games. I'm your host Albert, and this is episode 368.
Come on and take a free ride.
Oh yeah, I don't know that song. Did you make it up, Julius?
No, I didn't make it up.
No, okay. It's a famous song.
It's a famous song. It's free ride.
Okay.
I immediately thought of it when you said you were doing this one, in fact.
Really? Who? I'm sorry, I just don't know this song. How is it? An old song or a new song or what?
It's an old song.
Okay.
I couldn't tell you how old of an old song is.
But
My
it's
wife
oldish.
may be able to tell you because she's much more into the older songs.
Okay.
Now I'm curious how old of a song
now
it
you're
is.
Curious. If it's 80s,
1972.
Oh, that is really old. Yeah. Okay. Free ride. Okay, so today's game is Free Ride, that as we have hinted at quite directly. It's a train game published by Rio Grande Games and designed by Friedemann Friese. That's today's game.
And it looks like Ticket to Ride.
It does look like, but it is not Ticket to Ride at all.
And everybody who wants can now get a ticket to ride.
Yeah. A free Ticket to Ride. Yeah, I guess. Anyway, so yes, we're having a giveaway today. It's really exciting. Van Ryder Games gave me copies of their new expansions, the latest release, Series 3 expansions. I have 5 Final Girl expansions to give away. So one lucky winner. Actually, it's 5 expansions and a couple other things in there. The really neat. These are just came out to backers. It'll be hitting retail soon. And unfortunately, you need the base game to play it. So if you don't have the base game, you might have to buy it. But if you tell me you don't have it, I might give you a copy of it. I might get one for you. Depends how generous, how cheap I feel at the time when you ask, So anyway, if you want to enter, just send an email to Fractaloon. What is it? At oneplayerpodcast.com? No, Albert at oneplayerpodcast.com.
Albert.
Not Fractaloon. Sorry. That's my BGG username. That's a different email. Albert at oneplayerpodcast.com, and just let me know your favorite horror movie. This is in case you don't know, Final Girl is a game in which you play the final girl, the final person left alive in a horror movie, surviving against some deranged maniacal killer of sorts. So yeah, let me know what's your favorite horror movie. If you don't have a favorite horror movie, feel free to tell me why you don't like horror movies or what you would like in a horror movie or whatever you like. Just, put a little effort into it. That's all. That is, yeah. And timeline, I don't know. Send your entries in soon. Let's say this episode goes live in 2 weeks. So right around Valentine's Day-ish. A little after that, I guess. Yeah, I think it's on the 15th when it goes live. So let's say the end of February, early March, we'll do the drawing. All right. Anything else I should mention about that, Julius?
Nothing that I'm aware of.
Okay. So very exciting. I'm really thrilled about this. Really appreciate it. Thank you to AJ Porfirio of Van Ryder Games and Van Ryder Games themselves. The rest of them. All of them. Today's game, on the other hand, is Free Ride, which is not at all scary. It is a pleasant rail trip around Europe.
It looks scary.
No, I think it looks really nice, actually, I'll say. But it is a yeah, I like the art. I like the look of it. Yeah. I enjoyed it.
Interesting. I guess we'll talk more about that in a minute.
Okay. Well, then we will. Yeah, you are it's a pick up and deliver type game. You're traveling around Europe, going from one city to another. You get routes and then you travel those routes. You're building the rail networks first to connect all the cities of Europe and then traveling on these routes. It is a game for 1 through to 5 players. So supports a fair range. And as I said, it's designed by Friedemann Friese. Hence, the game name starts with an F. He likes to do that with his games. Interestingly, also, I was playing with my son and my friend Tim the other day, and I was commenting how odd it says it's a 55-minute game. What a precise number. And Tim pointed out that might be 55 is FF. Same as Friedemann Friese. So I think that's why it's 55 minutes. It did not feel like a 55-minute game. We'll talk more about that soon enough. So the components of this game, there's not a lot to it. It's relatively simple. You get a board. It's a normal size board, a quad fold sort of thing. It's a map of Europe. This is Eastern and Western Europe, so it includes everything from Portugal all the way to far away Russia, the far end of Russia even. And it has that big board with 100. Oh no, gosh, how many cities are in there exactly? I don't remember exactly how many cities are in it. I'd say about 45. I think is right. Yeah, yeah, 45 different cities to visit. It has a board. It has 135 city cards. There's three sets of each of the city cards, and they're numbered. There's deck number one, deck number two, deck number three. Each of the decks has all 45 cities in it. There's a bunch of wooden little rail tokens because I mentioned you're building a rail network. So these are just little wooden sticks. They're kind of they sort of look shaped like a rail car without a anything on top of it, without a container on top of it, in that it's a little bar with two little wheels on the side. I'm not sure if they're wheels or what, but they have a reason for having this odd shape. There's also some control markers, 125. There's five in each of the colors, each of the player colors. When you lay some rail, you're going to put a marker on them to say this is your track connecting two cities. You don't have to put a marker on every track, every piece of track, just a two on that city. Hey, I lost Julius. Julius, where you at? Julius, you are gone. Hey,
I'm back.
welcome back, Julius.
Don't worry, I was not saying anything important. I was saying
That's
on
okay.
your comment about those things, what they look like. I was trying to figure out what exactly those are supposed to be. The the railroad ties. I'm really not sure.
Yeah, no, they're little cars, I guess. I assume they're little cars. I don't know. They're pieces of track, little black pieces of track. Anyway, there's a bunch of those. 140. They are limited, so if you were to run out, which seems unlikely, then you just go without. There are five trains and five hammers, one in each of the five player colors. The trains you're going to move on the board as you're traveling around from city to city. The hammers are used when you're building. You may need to use it as a marker. There's a bunch of coins, and basically they're player mats. There's two large tiles, an engine and a car. Actually, there's one engine and two cars for each player color. They're really just information about what your actions are, and very very brief information. And the two cars are the cars you can be able to use to carry to put your what do you call it your contracts your different cities on that you're going to. So it's just a place to put the cards. That's all it is. Not necessarily, but they are nice and they are a little bit helpful in organizing things. And finally, there's the rule book. So not a whole lot of writing components, a bunch of pieces of each, but not tons and tons.
So, can we now discuss about how you think the game looks?
I really like. I think the board looks fine. It's a Friedemann Friese game. It's got that sort of greenish color to it.
Hmm.
It's the board itself is simple enough, but the point of the board is to show you all the cities and the connections, sort of like a Ticket to Ride board. Really, it's a lot like a Ticket to Ride board, I guess.
It's less colorful
Um,
than a Ticket to Ride board.
is it? You don't have to worry about the colors of the tracks. All the tracks are just the same color. Anybody could lay track on any space. You don't need a certain number before you could do it of cards or anything. So the color doesn't matter. What I really like is the art on the cards. Each of the cards, I mentioned there's 45 cards for the 45 cities. Each card has a picture of some monument or important building of the city in question. So, for example, Paris has the Eiffel Tower. Um, Rome, I don't remember what Rome is. It's not the Colosseum. I think it's a large government building or something that used to
and
be a
and
government
now,
building is
Albert,
now a museum. So there's different stuff.
tell our audience about how colorful those pictures are.
Sepia toned, and that's part of what I like about it. They're sepia toned, and the board itself. When you flip over the board to the back, you see all the cards of the cities are drawn in the back to look like postcards. Like somebody took all the postcards from all the 45 cities they visited and sort of just laid it out on the board on the
I feel like
table.
I'm having an
And
argument with my wife because she also very much prefers, black and white pictures and sepia tone pictures. And I normally say I would love to see a little bit more color, a little bit more flair to these kind of things, as opposed to just old black and white. It looks like I'm looking at a game from the 1940s. There's no color. It's so bland and washed out.
So yes, the cards themselves have very little color on them because, like I said, they look like old time postcards or something or photographs. That's the style that I think they were going for, and I think it works because to me it makes me think of like traveling in the 50s or 40s, or even before that across Europe when the train travel was still really common and just probably a lot more exciting, a lot more romantic feeling. I think. So I like the style of the cards, the art. The board itself simple. The train tiles simple. Functional. So yes, I guess we disagree on it. You think your wife is right and you're wrong. You could let her know that.
I'll pass it on.
Okay, fair. The all right. So then I
I
guess
also
that
find it
brings us
surprising
to the
that
rules.
with cards and Ticket to Ride, a city card has part of the icon showing where it is. You may not be as familiar with where Bucharest is on this map. There's no indication of where, Minsk or Odessa is. You have to look around and find those things. There's no
Hmm.
assistance.
That is true. Yeah, I did find myself wishing there was something like that on the cards at some points when I'm playing, because there are 45 cities, and I've been to Europe. I have not traveled all over Europe. I kind of know a little bit of the geography, I guess, enough that I see a city name. I say, "Oh, this sounds to me like it's Germany or Russia," or I have no idea where this is, and eventually I find it in somewhere in the southern area in what used to be Constantinople, right?
Hmm.
Istanbul. So I somewhere in that area. So I never don't necessarily know, but after a while you start playing, you kind of start learning. Oh, it's over here. It can be frustrating a little bit, I guess. It never really bothered me, and it does come up because later on you are definitely looking for those city locations when you're trying to choose your routes and whatnot. So yeah, you're right. That would be handy. Absolutely. Um, okay. The rules. The It's a like 6 or 8 page rule book. The rules are pretty simple. There's not a whole lot to them. I did find the way they wrote it interesting. The game is divided into 3 parts: the prologue, the main game, and the I think the last part was the final round, maybe, or something that's called. The prologue is just once you've set up the game and you're going to start playing, it's the first thing that everybody has to do to pick their initial cities and routes. I found that a little confusing as I when I read the rules. I didn't find the rules were extremely well described. The Normally when you read a rule book, it says, "Well, here's a summary of what's going to happen, and now we'll go into everything in detail." And that's pretty common. The summary for this was so brief at the beginning that I completely missed it, and I'm reading through the rules and I'm still really confused, not sure what a turn is and what a turn order is like. So I had to go back and find it, and finally, oh, here it is. It's this little tiny sentence over here in the middle of a paragraph, and that also happens to be where it tells me how many actions I can choose each turn. One. The answer is just one. But so yeah, the rulebook it was workable. It's not a complicated game, so it wasn't really frustrating or anything. But I did feel like it could be better. And then, as is pretty typical, the solo rules are at the end saying, "Here's the changes you need to make, and this is how you play the solo game now." Not my favorite, but it wasn't too bad with this game. It's relatively simple mechanically speaking. All right. Any comments on the rules from you, Julius?
Nope.
Okay.
Their rules. I was a little surprised how short they were.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a simple game. It really is. Tickets ride simple or something. So the gameplay, I already mentioned there's 3 parts: the prologue, the main game, and then the final round. I guess even before we talk about the prologue, let me talk about the setup. You're gonna have the board in the middle table. Everybody's gonna get some of those rail markers, those little black sticks, and all the pieces in your player color, and your 2 train tiles. Then I mentioned the 45 cards in each deck. You're gonna take cards from the first deck, shuffled up, and make 3 stacks of 3 cards each. So you're gonna one second card below it, third card below that, then next to it another stack of 3, and next to it another stack of 3. Those are the initial routes that you could pick from. The first player will get to pick a route, and you're saying, "I'm going to deliver from one of the cities in that stack to another city in that stack." It's interesting the way it works. There's 3 cards, but you're only picking 2 cards. You're either choosing to deliver from the first card to the second card, or from the second card to the third card. Those are your only 2 choices. You can't go from the third to the second or first. You can't go from the second to the first. You can't skip the second and do first to third. You're either choosing 1 to 2 or 2 to 3. The other card will get discarded after you pick it. And that's true throughout the whole game. So the first round, a the first player will pick one of those routes of the three choices he has available and pick two of the cards from the stack he chose and discard the other one. You will then lay them on your car, not on the engine card on the tile, but the other one, the one that's just the regular train car. And you'll put your destination on the top, your starting location on the bottom, and then you're going to take your train and put it in that starting city that you chose. That's what you do in the prologue. For the second player, this is a little weird, but it kind of makes sense. I guess it's just to give people that went later more options. Now that person took one of the three routes that they had to choose from, one of three stacks, we're going to add two more stacks, and the next player can now has four to choose from. And then once they pick the one, if there's more players, you're going to add two more stacks again, so the next player has more choices than the previous player. You're going to keep doing this for all five players. At the end of the game, you're going to refill to six. No matter how many players there are, the rest of the game, there'll always be six stacks to choose from. And that was the prologue. Everybody now has sets of cards. Everybody is in a different city with a different destination. Simple enough. It sounds a little weird, but once you've tried, oh yeah, this is simple and straightforward. The main game now takes place. It goes in turn order from whoever was starting player, and each round you're doing one of three actions. You're either laying track. You could lay two track each round, or you could move your train. You could move it 2 cities distance. You always move from city to city. You don't doesn't matter how much space, how many tracks are between those 2 cities. It varies. Really crowded parts of Europe, there's a lot of train tracks everywhere. Places like Eastern Russia, where it's more plains and open, I guess, the cities are much farther apart and it requires more tracks to connect the 2 cities. So those are your actions: lay track or move, or there's a third action, which is get new tracks for free. There's a little more details to each of the actions. The first action, when you're laying track, um, you have to finish any tracks you started previously. You don't have to complete a whole section in one go, and you can't if it's 3 or 4 long. That's when that little hammer comes in. If you left something unfinished, you'll put the little hammer in front of you as a reminder that the next time you build, you need to continue what you started. If you were down to none or one track piece left in your stash of however many you started with, then you could spend a coin to buy 5 more pieces of track, and that'll keep you going. But that costs you a coin. Coins are important because they're also victory points at the end of the game. The second action is moving. You're going to move from wherever you are up to 2 spaces distance, like I said. And if you happen to reach your destination city or pass through your destination in those movements, you've completed that route, and you could discard it to keep it because those are victory points at the end. But you set it aside face down, and you can now choose to take a new route. When you take a new route, you have to have gone through the starting city this round. Either you started in it, moved through it, or ended in it. And then you could take that route and put it on your empty train car. Later on in the game, you're going to get that second train car. You actually could have 2 routes at once, potentially. Sometimes it's hard to do that, but you can if the cards are available. Each time you take a train route, you'll take one train route from those stacks available, discard the card that you didn't choose, and refill those train routes. At any point, if at the end of the round when you fill those routes, if that finishes one of the stacks, if it finishes stack number 1, you're gonna flip over your or no, sorry, you're gonna add the second train car. You can now carry 2 routes at once, potentially going through the first city, continuing on to through the second city you picked up, stopping at your first stop and going to the last stop, and now you've completed 2 routes in that one little journey, which is nice. If you finish a second stack of train cards and start your third one, you now flip over your train. Your train, the engine, actually now tells you instead of being able to move 2 spaces each turn, you can move 3 spaces. So your trains are now faster. So that was the second action. That third action was take 5 new tracks for free. This is if you didn't want to pick up tracks during the build phase because you're going to have to pay for it. If you just don't want to pay for it, you could spend a whole turn to just do that and nothing else. There's a couple other things that matter here. I mentioned before that you mark those tracks when you build them with your little colored piece. The reason that happens is when you choose to move, you could move through anybody's track. If you move through an opponent's track, you have to pay them a coin, and that now turns into a public track. Their little marker goes away. Anybody can use that track for free. So sometimes it behooves you to lay track with the hope that other people will use it so you could get paid a little bit of money. The other thing related to that is when you build, I didn't mention it before, you could build anywhere that connects to your rail network. So once you've laid your first track, you could add more stuff from the starting city or ending city or any cities in between and spread out from that way. If you connected your rail network to another player's, you can extend it from any of the tracks that are all connected, whether it's yours or an opponent's. It doesn't matter. You can extend from a city that you could reach, even if there are control markers still on that city that are not yours or on that track. So that is the main gameplay. It's basically just laying track and picking up routes to pick up and deliver to. I mentioned there's also the third part, which is the final round. Once the deck of cards runs out, and there's I guess 5 or 6 stacks that you could choose from. You keep playing like normal. At any point, a player can choose to pass. Once a player passes, they are out of the game for the rest of the game. But every time the turn comes back around to them, they collect a coin. So if you pass early, you might collect coins while the other players are still moving. From my experience, once you pass, everybody else pretty much starts passing because the coins are valuable for the end game. The other thing I didn't mention, it's not really that important, is there's a few cities along the edge of the map. If you deliver to those, or if you go to those first, you're gonna get 2 coins. You're gonna set up 2 coins on each of those cities at the edge of the board, and if you go there and the coins are still there, they're yours to take. All right, so you've played the game. It is now over, and you want to figure out your score. It's pretty simple. Well, okay, that's not pretty simple. You get the first person that visited each city will get 5 points for the cities they visited, whether it's a starting city or an ending city. But they got to have a card for it. Anybody that reached it after them will get 2 points only, not 5. So it's definitely better to go first. The way you figure it out is if I have card 1 for Barcelona and you've got card 2 for Barcelona, I get 5 points, you get 2 points. It doesn't matter if actually card 2 was picked up first and actually delivered to first. It's that lower number that really matters. Because that sort of thing can happen potentially where I went to the city before you did, but I did it with a higher number. So those are either 5 or 2 points. There is a way in the rules on how to score, how to keep track of this, because it's a little tricky if you're going to do that, right? Once you finish the game, you clear the board. Everybody looks at their number 1 cards and put one of their control markers on the cities that they have a 1 for, and then everybody gets their 2 cards. And if you have a card that's a number 2 and there's no marker in that city, go ahead and put a marker because you're now the first person to reach it. And then same for 3. So not terribly hard, but not super easy either. Finally, the other thing you're going to score is your coins. They're 3 points a coin, which is it's kind of a lot because if you think about it, I mentioned that each time that you get passed, you're going to get 3 points at the end of the game. A person with 2 cards that are number 3 are probably only going to get 4 points total by taking that turn. So it's not really that worthwhile unless you're like in the middle of the delivery and might get the points right away. But that is basically how the game works. The solo game is a little bit different. Before we go into the solo game, actually a lot different. Do you have any questions or comments, Julius?
I was about to comment that the solo game looks very different, but my comments
Mm-hmm.
on the main version of the game is obviously you're not going to have any of this ownership once we get over to the solo.
Right.
But otherwise, no, not really. It seems pretty straightforward. Buy rails, keep
Yep.
going.
Yep. Exactly. Pretty straightforward. The solo game. So the solo game is a challenge. It's not really a game, I guess it's a game, but they called it a solo challenge inside the book. They didn't say that in the outside, I think. In here, your goal is to visit every single city. That means to pick up from or deliver to every city on the board. You're gonna have to do at least all 45 of them. Some may get visited more than once and would have to, but that doesn't matter. And you also have a limited amount of time to do it in. What you're gonna do is you're gonna use the green train because there's a green board specifically for the solo actions to keep track of the solo, how many actions you have in building and moving. It's actually 5. You could build 5 each turn, and you could move 5 spaces each turn, so it's a lot more. The other thing that's different is you're going to have unlimited rails. You never have to pay for them. They're all available to you from the beginning. And you also have a bunch of money at the beginning. You're gonna once you put all those coins on the map that I mentioned, I think it's like 14 or 16 coins. It's two per those edge cities that have the marks for them. You're gonna use all the remaining coins but one. These coins are really used just to keep track of how much time you have left. They're timers. Each time you take an action, each turn, you're gonna spend one of your coins, and then you could build your 5 pieces of track or move your 5 spaces. And like I said, your goal is basically to visit all the cities before you run out of time. If you reach one of the edge cities, you pick up those 2 coins. That just bought you another 2 rounds. It's it's simple enough mechanically. Other than that, the way building works, cost for building is the same because cost for building can vary. There's ferries and tunnels that cost one more than normal, a lot like Ticket to Ride. Um, but mechanically, all the moving and delivering and all those rules are the same. The only difference is you have to visit every city by the end of the game, and you got to not run out of time. Simple enough. So that is the solo game. Any questions there? Any comments?
Well, here's my comment. So, with the main game, you're trying to have essentially an economic race where you're trying to both balance the coins that you're collecting when it is that you're trying to free up other players to take cheaper rides, when it is that you're trying to block off other players so that they have to pay you, when it is that you're trying to make sure to have the correct routes. So, there's a lot of that involved when you're playing the multiplayer game. When you're playing the solo game, you come to it's a challenge. It seems like a very different game, just happens to use the same components. Is that accurate?
I would say that's fair. Yes, the multiplayer game. So I played it 2 player and 3 player, and they're both fun. It is fun picking up the routes and figuring out which route to do. It's fun building the network. All that I found it really fun. 2 player game. You don't get in each other's way very much. That thing where I mentioned where like if you use somebody else's track, you pay a coin and then that coin is now free for anybody to use. That barely came up in a 2 player game. In a 3 player game, it definitely came up a bunch more. Imagine if you're using 4 or 5 players, it would come up a lot. And I found that kind of interaction fun. That was interesting. And we all took different strategies. I took the strategy of trying to collect all those coins on the outside. My son tried to build a lot of tracks where people might have to pay him. My friend Tim played where he was trying to get the a lot of this control of the center board. So at least in this game, that center board strategy is what won, hands down. But yeah, there's a lot of more interaction with it, and that was fun. The gameplay in general plays really quickly too, which is kind of interesting. It's fun. Your turns are really fast because you're only doing 2 actions, and then the next person goes. The only part that ever gets slow is when you're trying to choose which routes to take, and like you said, that not being familiar with the cities makes it a little harder, and you're constantly looking at all the cards because there's 6 stacks of 3 each, and trying to figure out which pair of cities I want to do. Um, it pays to take short routes in this. The shorter they are, the sooner you finish and get the points for those cards, and then you could take up another route because up until you get to the second round, you could only have one route on you at a time, right? So it goes kind of slow, and you're not moving as fast. So those short routes are definitely going to be valuable. If you have 2 cities next to each other, that's awesome. That's fantastic. Um, but yeah, I found it really fun to play. The solo game is different. Absolutely feels different. I still found it fun though. Don't get me wrong, but it's more thinky for sure because it's a puzzle and you got to visit every city, and you start doing things thinking like, okay, I got to do this city and that city, but if I discard city number 3, now I need to make sure to go somewhere else. So where have I been? Where haven't I been? You have a time limit because you're discarding a coin each turn, so you're kind of trying to be efficient at the same time, but you don't have that option. But it definitely feels more puzzly. I enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed the solo game. I do have one gripe with it, which is that it can be frustrating in that if you're playing, you're trying to be really careful, and all of a sudden, early on in round one, one thing that's important here for 2 player and solo game, you're not going to use all the cards from each of the sets. You're discarding about a third of the cards, so that each city only appears in 2 decks. Paris might be in deck 1 and 2, Madrid might be decks 2 and 3, and Sevilla might be 1 and 3, or something like that. So each card only appears twice, and you have to visit every city. So let's say I discarded Sevilla and Madrid early on because I wanted to take the other cards from that stack of cards. I don't take the other route. Later on, I refill the stack, and the new stack I make has Madrid on the top, Sevilla on the bottom, and something else in the middle, I suddenly cannot win the game no matter what I do because I got to either do 1 and 2 or 2 and 3 from that stack. I cannot visit both cities. I've just lost the game. And that can be frustrating because you play and you're working really hard at it, you're being really careful, and suddenly just unfortunate card draw and it's over. And all you could do is start over. And the goal is to win, to complete all cities. If you complete all the cities, then you can try and track your score and see how well you did. I've never got in there. I've never been able to complete a route because each time bad card draws just end the game for me. So I do find that frustrating. It's still fun trying to get it to work. I found in the solo game it really helps if you could track what you're doing. So I've tried different ways. I've used my markers. Whenever I visit a city, I marked it on the board so I could see where I've been and where I still need to go. This way I could quickly say, oh, there's a Sevilla card out there and there's no marker on it. I need to go there.
That's really smart.
Yeah. I tried it the other way where whenever I chose to, I put a marker on the ones I discarded so I know I have to go there because it's discarded. That also worked pretty well. Actually, I think I kind of like that one better. But I still need to tweak them. I haven't quite found the right way to do it. It only works if I don't get a bad card draw, though. If I do, it doesn't matter how much marking I've done, I can't win. So that is Free Ride.
Do you feel like you have a lot of control over that? Like, do you feel that it's...
Mm-mm. I did not feel like I had control over it at all. It really, you each time you take a stack, you are discarding one of the 3 cards. So eventually, you've discarded a lot of cards. Once I've done, gosh, how many cards are there? I said 135. I'm discard. So I'm gonna do 90 routes. 35 cards are gonna be or 45 cards are gonna be discarded for sure. By the time I get to that third round, there's a pretty decent chance 2 cards that I have to visit are gonna be in undoable locations. So it feels like it's hard to win. I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you don't mind that, it's the process of playing is still fun.
No, it's not a bad thing when something is hard to win. I'm playing Unstoppable, which I also feel right now is hard to win. But it's a matter that it feels like my efforts are achieving something. If it's hard to win because you have no control, just the cards don't give you something, that's not fun.
That's frustrating. Yeah. So when I play, what is it, Klondike, the old solitaire game where you got the stacks of cards,
yeah,
and you got a stack with 1 card and a stack with 2 and all that. I used to play that a bunch. I remember, and it would get to a point sometimes where suddenly I got to a point where it got locked in. I could not win. I'd gone through all my cards. There's just nothing I could do. In that game, I eventually said, you know what? I'm just going to choose one of these cards and reveal it, even if I'm not supposed to technically. By the way, I'll reveal it and keep playing. And eventually, I get stuck again. And I would say, I decided for me, a victory was how many times I had to do that. If I did 0 times, that was really good. If I had to cheat 3 times, that was less good.
cute.
So I suppose I could do the same sort of thing here. Say, okay, so I failed now at winning the game. Let me get rid of one of these anyway, except that I failed it, and see how well I still do. So I feel like maybe I need to add an extra level of scoring in there to see not how well I won, but how well I lost or how badly I lost. That would make it more interesting because then I could keep going. Then I don't feel like it was all for nothing. I think that would be the trick.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm already a little disappointed by a solo game that essentially just takes the components and then says, hey, we can make another game using these same components.
You have always had a problem with that. Yeah. That's never bothered me so much. I don't mind. If the solo game is interesting, I am fine with that. There's been a few games. Well, okay, I can think of one off the top of my head, which is At the Gates of Loyang, where I thought the solo game was way better than the multiplayer game because they took the components and changed how it worked. Right, that one, the cards in the multiplayer game. There's a playing cards and taking cards thing that you went around in the table. In the solo game, it was a big tableau where all the cards are visible, and you had to plan when you took which cards. And I thought the solo version was way more interesting than the multiplayer. So I thought that made the game better. So I'm not against them changing it around, especially if it works well.
I'm just not sure that this one works well.
Well, yeah. So there's that one big fail, but I'm still having fun playing, so I can forgive it, especially if my workaround idea of scoring how badly I lose by works, which I can't see why it wouldn't.
I can understand that. I don't know. For me, I think this takes a free ride right on out.
Okay. Yeah, got derailed, huh?
Yeah. That was a better pun than the one I had. All right. Have a good
Okay.
night,
Well,
all.
all right. Bye, everyone. And don't forget to enter the contest. Quickly send an email.
Thanks for listening. We love feedback, so we love hearing from you. You can reach me at julius@oneplayerpodcast.com or JLBird on BGG, and Albert can be reached at albert@oneplayerpodcast.com or Fractalude on BGG. Our website is oneplayerpodcast.com with the number 1, and we're also on Twitter at oneplayerpodcast. The intro music is copyright Angus, can be found at jamendo.com. The transition music is copyright by Dan Elduce Pancaldi, whose page is at donpancaldi.com. The One Player Podcast is protected under a Creative Commons share-alike license. Thanks for listening.